So my name's Andrew Selleck. Remington Selleck is actually my dog. I'm here to speak about tiny homes. So what are you guys' questions as far as that goes? Any questions to get off the start? No?
Well, I mean, are you familiar with regulations in the state of New Hampshire?
That is a good question.
Because we have a tiny house.
Do you? Alright, so when they originally asked me to speak about this, I was like, I'm not an expert at all as far as building tiny homes and all that stuff. So anybody better to speak is, so it sounds like you guys are better to speak. But
Well, we don't live in a tiny house, but I built one.
you built one?
He lives in one that he built.
Do you?
Yeah, I built two.
Okay.
Oh,
Do you
you're in
live
charge
here?
now.
Oh, sorry.
What's that? Do you live here in New Hampshire?
No, I live in just over the border in Mass, in Royalston, out in the middle of the woods.
Alright.
So,
Alright, well, we can
I'm happy to share any experience I have.
absolutely.
I've gone through tons of
And
regulations.
I'm going to speak the same way I always speak when I do any sort of classes. Anybody with better experience, feel free to chime in at any points. Well, I'll hand out these. This is a cool little thing that I downloaded off the internet, and I'll explain where I got it from and everything like that. It's just a cool little sheet, so. So I guess would you? So we'll start off with what is a tiny home. A tiny home is anything from 100 to 400 square feet, essentially. And why do people want to live in a tiny home? Well, can you share your experience exactly?
Yeah, sure.
Your name's Chris?
My name's Chris, yeah.
Pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So I wanted to basically downsize and be more self-sufficient, sort of, you know,
Okay.
just the way most people want to be. I really wanted to do it so that I didn't want to build. So I want to own my house because I realized, like, this is all true, man. Like, homes suck away your income. It's not just the mortgage, it's the taxes. It's then the town wants excise tax for your car and all your personal property. It's insurance companies, it's alarm companies, it's heating oil, it's your window breaks, your tree falls in your house, your insurance rates go up. It just sucks your life away.
Yes.
And so the more you can own your house, the more you can get away from some of those things. Like for me, since I own it, I don't particularly care about insurance. I don't have to pay for insurance. It's so small that if it burns, I'll take the risk and just rebuild it. I choose to heat with wood, so I have no heating costs. I live on 9 acres. I go and cut all my own firewood. I don't have to pay for heating oil or anything, no gas. I actually do have propane for my hot water heater, so it cost me $160 2 years ago, and my tank is still 40% full. So I'm probably going to go another year on it.
Okay, now what size of propane tank do you get?
That's like one of these 100-pound,
Okay,
whatever
so
ones.
it's
Yeah,
like yay big.
it's a big one, but it only runs hot water.
Okay.
And so basically what I'm getting at is that my living costs, I'm going down to, you know, property taxes and a little bit of propane and some gasoline for my generator. I'm also off grid, so I don't have an electric bill. So I've got gasoline every month, a couple gallons, a little bit of propane, and, you know, $80 for property taxes. Because it's so small, the assessors can't even figure out how to tax it. Like, I've had discussions with them, like, you know, that's too much, that's too little. We sort of came to a, you know, agreement that's worth about $800 a year for taxes.
Okay.
For the house and the land, and it's 9 acres of land. So for $80 a month, I'm living in some, let's just call it $100, round up. $100 a month is what I live on right now. I mean, I'm about to cut my job hours in half and just start doing some things I want to do instead of working for somebody else.
Okay.
So.
Alright, so we're a little ahead of the game, but I'm happy we are, that we have you guys. So essentially you're financially free through living small in a tiny home.
Freedom is not just about, you know, can you buy any gun you want? It's about, do you have to work for somebody? You have to get up every single morning and go work for somebody, otherwise you're going to lose your job and your house and your car and everything else. Like, that's not free.
Exactly, so you're basically off the system. I mean,
You could be, or you could stay on the system if you want, but you get to leave at any time you want.
Yeah.
Like, I could choose to go hook up an electrical system in my house and pay for grid electricity, but I know I've got solar panels and generators. I could just tell them to go pound sand one day and not, you know, pay for it.
How does that all sound to you guys? I mean, pretty awesome, right? Basically, when they asked me to prepare this, I was going to talk about that precisely and how great it is. So you guys are all here because of Free State project, or?
No.
Okay. So, what's so appealing is like imagine bringing home one paycheck a month and just completely saving it. That's liberty, that's awesome. You know, you can essentially do what you want, you can pick up and go wherever you want, you know. And so that's what's so appealing to tiny homes. But so I'm gonna just start off by reading a little paragraph or a reading from a website. You guys, are you familiar with the Tiny Life?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
It's a website about tiny homes, and it's people who, it's like a blog basically of this person who has been living.
I've read a lot of blogs like that, so, yeah.
Okay, all right, well, here it is. So what are tiny houses? A tiny house means a tiny living. Simply put, is a social movement where people are downsizing the space that they live in. A typical American home is around 2,600 square feet, while the typical small or tiny home is around 100 to 400 square feet. Tiny homes come in all shapes, sizes, and forms, but they focus on smaller spaces and simplified living. People are joining the movement for many reasons, but the most popular reason is because of environmental concerns, financial concerns, and seeking more time and freedom. What do you find about that as far as, are you using your time more? Are you getting like out of your house per se and going and doing the things you want to see?
Yes, I mean, just started, but like this year I happen to be right near a snowmobile trail, so I can snowmobile from my property out. So yes, I'm starting to explore the area, but I haven't actually had time to do it, which is why my next phase is to quit my job mostly and, you know, work half time. So I haven't quite gotten to that point yet, but yes, I think it's possible.
Yeah, all right. So, and this is what we're going to talk more about. So financial concerns, seeking more time and freedom. For most Americans, 1/3 to 1/2 of their income is dedicated to the roof over their heads. This translates to 15 years of working over your lifetime just to pay for it, and because of it, 76% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Don't we see that a lot in the news and whatnot? So it's a huge burden. So, tiny homes. Financial freedom, financial liberty, essentially is what it is. And living is basically getting off the grid and being more self-sufficient and everything like that. So if we're able to live with less financial, you know, burden, then that becomes more free and everything like that. So how this impacts us as far as the Free State project is concerned is there's a whole group of people here in New Hampshire who want to start building these homes and essentially living this lifestyle. And you've built 2 homes, correct?
We built one.
You built 2.
You built 2 homes, you built 1. And you live here in New Hampshire?
No, we're in Illinois,
Illinois, okay.
so we're in the process of escaping.
You're in the process.
That's our boat too. We're in the process of building one that we plan on taking with us.
Okay, all right. So to be honest, you guys, sounds to me like you guys are better experienced and more qualified to do this talk than I am. So I wish they got in contact with you guys. So what are you guys' experiences as far as tiny homes? What piques your interest?
Well, I watched the Tiny House Nation show, but I do have a question. I have 4 kids, so I wonder like how that's possible with a family, you know? I've seen a lot of couples and maybe like one child, but...
One thing that we have a niece that lives with us sometimes, but one thing that we've really looked at is that building one tiny house doesn't have to be it. A lot of people with families will build like a second tiny house, which is the kids' room. And
That
then you also
attaches.
have freedom for when they grow up and move to college, they could take their pod with
So you
them.
disconnect it and they take theirs with them, and that way they're also growing up with more freedom. They have a kitchen, they have that kind of stuff.
So
As
you
they
have
age, they can be
A
more
main tiny
self-dependent.
house for the family, and then other tiny house structures as rooms outside of that is one option we've seen.
So they can learn to, and get used to living more self-sufficiently at a younger
More
age.
self-sufficient, and then when they leave, they don't have a mortgage. And it might not be the house they want if they don't choose that lifestyle, but when they leave, they have a place to live.
Right.
So one
That's
option
theirs.
is just several little tiny pods surrounding it. I think that's the best option we found for when our niece is older, you know, for just more privacy for everybody. When she's younger though, right now she's only 2, and we have separate lofts, like we're building separate lofts with, you know, walls, so she'll have her own play place, her own bed that's separate from everything else.
So very good. So does that answer your question? Now,
That's a couple of things to add to that. If, I think the design principle is, basically everybody needs to have spaces to get away from each other. Even if you're married, you're probably not gonna be with your partner at all
Especially if
times.
you're married.
Especially if you, yeah, so, right, so I think if you design the house so that everybody has their own spaces they can get away and close the door and decompress or do whatever they have to do, that's the design principle. And so you can do that a lot in lofts. That's, like if you have your center of your tiny house open, you end up with 2 lofts, well, there's 2 kids' bedrooms. Your bedroom's underneath it, or something like that. That works really well. If you looked in Tiny House Nation, they actually did that. It was a house by the river. You know, everybody sort of had their own. Well, I think the adults probably didn't have a very good private space. They sort of that couch that flipped down from the wall, and I don't think that was too
I
good.
saw one that did like an apartment and they ended up making it into a couple bedrooms, but it was a little different than it really didn't seem tiny housey.
Yeah, when I grew up, my house was, I mean, we had a very small house, but I think my room was probably 10 by 10. I didn't fill it out, so I think, you know, for a kid, if you could get them 6 by 6, you know, square that's theirs, I don't think
Yeah.
you'd have a problem with that. I
And
mean,
from what I saw, like it seems like it's really about like building in organization,
Yeah,
space like that.
And nice space used, yes.
Because even now, like with a big, well, I have a 3-bedroom house, it's like 1,200 square feet. It's hard, it's a lot of people, but it's because there's not, like, I keep having to get things to make organization happen. It seems like these are like designed to kind of.
But you also have to cut way
downsizing.
back
Yeah,
though.
the
You
big-
also- you know, no, I was just saying, you also have to cut way back on what you're bringing in. And on that show, I'm sure you've seen, I mean, that's one of the big things that they hit before they ever move in. It's like, okay, here's what you're living with now. We're gonna take away at least half of that, at least. And then we're gonna pare down from there. So you kind of do have to pare down to essentials and then find spaces for all of those things.
now, speaking of that, actually, do you have like storage property or anything like that?
I have a barn. I mean, since I want to be, you know, living off the land, I have a tractor, an ATV, and a barn. I do have a place to keep all my tools. But as far as storage in the house goes, I have under my counters, I have some up in the eaves, but I don't have a ton. And I've minimized down to.
So basically you own more tools than you do like personal
I
clothing
do,
and stuff
absolutely,
like that. Alright. Now to speak about laws that you were wondering, as far as New Hampshire is concerned, I found 2 things that somewhat resemble what this will entail. Is essentially are you guys familiar with tilted property? You're not familiar with that? Alright. I'm not either. So there's 2 groups. It's personal property and tilted property. It's like manufactured homes and trailer parks, per se. So as far as laws are concerned, I know you were wondering about when does it become personal or permanent? I have not found anything as far as them coming and taxing you for a permanent structure. So that's a great question. I think if you live up north, the tax people and townspeople are too, you know, they're not strict at all. So I know a buddy of mine owns property and the tax people came of the town and were like, well, you put a driveway in, so we gotta tax your driveway. And he's like, it's not a driveway, it's land I just drive on to get out of the property. And they were like, oh, okay, we won't tax you then. And, you know, and then he built a structure on it. It wasn't like a square structure. He built it to piss off the tax man. Like the walls were like this way, and you know, and they were just like, okay, 50 square feet, you know. So as far as laws are concerned, here in New Hampshire, I think the more north you go, the more lenient it gets, because people just, you know, it's kind of a live and let live mentality up there. Southern here, though, I don't know, you know. So there's it can be quoted as tilted property or personal property. So I don't know if that's more research you'll have to do as far as towns are concerned. So does that kind of answer your question of what you were wondering?
Well, I think it's gonna come down to local
Exactly.
I could share probably a little bit more.
Yeah,
with you,
please.
since when I built my house, I actually lived illegally in a 66 square foot house for a long time. And the first thing is the story I told at Pork Fest, and it's 100% true. Like when I went up for my permits, actually I moved on this property, I just stuck a mailbox in the ground, and my mail started showing up. I filled out a little form. I had no idea how you did a mailbox, but that's how you do it. You just put it there and tell the post office. But so I went to get my permits for my septic system. I had to go before the Board of Health. And one of the guys like, "Where are you building?" And it's like, "Over there by the fire pond." He's like, "Oh yeah, you look, I put that mailbox up last week." Like I'm in the middle of the woods. There's like 1,000 acres around me with nothing. And this guy
Do you just
recognized.
make up your address for the mailbox?
Well, he gave me a number for the lot. So, but basically, these people notice stuff. Like even if you're in the middle of the woods, they're gonna notice that you're there.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful. And I think the underlying thing, and the biggest problem you're gonna have with a tiny house anywhere, it doesn't matter where you are, unless you're in Alaska somewhere, is what do you do about septic? Like if you have water going into your house, they're gonna wanna know where's your septic system. And you can have a composting toilet, and most places, Massachusetts isn't okay with it, but New Hampshire probably is. You sort of have to, you're gonna have to lie to them. You have to say, look, it's just a dry camp, we come here on the weekends, and even if you're living there full time, you need to sort of hope that the man doesn't come and check you up.
Ours has an incinerating toilet.
And that's fine, they're not gonna, you won't get hit for that, you'll get hit, what do you do with your gray water?
Right.
What do you do about that? And you can say that, well, I catch it, and like I have a friend who, he does this, and it's really funny. He has a hose that comes out, and all the gray water drains into this bucket. And so if anybody ever comes up, he's like, oh yeah, my gray water goes in that bucket, and pours it on trees, and the guy who came and looked said, oh yeah, that's fine. What he didn't tell him is that the water goes in that bucket, and he only empties it, he never empties it. He just lets the water go in the bucket, and it spills all over the ground, and that's it. Like, so he's got a plausible deniability about, how does he get rid of his gray water?
Yeah.
Literally just, he's got some grass there and just kind of rolls downhill. He's got a nice green lawn, but he doesn't do anything with it. So what I did was all a septic leach field is literally a pit dug in the ground. And if you have sandy soil, if you dump water in, you can see how fast it percolates in there. If it percolates pretty fast, you just put a pipe and you let all your gray water drain into it. Try and use biodegradable soap so it doesn't pollute the environment, and that's it. So you can get away with that.
So you said you have a incinerator
It's an
toilet?
incinerating toilet.
How does it, can you explain how that works exactly?
It works off of electric, so you do have to have electric, but it incinerates it. I mean, there's no water involved, it
It's like
goes in.
cremation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 2,000 degrees, it incinerates it, and then it's supposedly, we haven't used it because nobody's living in it, but supposedly like once a month, you just take the ashtray out and and they said it's perfectly, there's no toxins or anything, and you just dump the ashes somewhere.
Now, how big is the setup that you guys are looking?
Ours is on a, I'll give you the short story. Our son in high school got interested in tiny houses. He went away to college and studied construction management. He was doing internships overseas during the summers, so he wasn't home. And then his last summer before his senior year, he had an internship in Chicago. So he said, let's build this tiny house that he'd been, for years he'd been thinking about it. So we bought a 20-foot long, 8-foot wide construction trailer, and he designed it, and we built it with primarily reclaimed materials. I mean, basically the only thing we bought new was the framing lumber, but all of the interior, he's got oak floors in the interior, those are all pulled out of houses that were slated for demolition. His doors were pulled out of houses slated for demolition. His windows were reclaimed from houses. Virtually everything in there is reclaimed. The cladding on the outside of the house, the siding on the outside of the house was, I worked at a golf course, we had a storm that came through, a big English elm tree came down. English elm is what they used to build ships out of in Great Britain, so it has pretty substantial resistance to water. So we had that milled and dried, and we use that for siding. So I mean, it's basically, it's been a pretty organic thing. And
He did buy a metal roof though.
we did have to buy, we bought a metal roof for it. So I mean, it's pretty bulletproof.
Okay.
And
Very
he
good.
planned, his plan was he was gonna live in it, but it just hasn't worked out that way because with his job, he's been in California, he's been in Oregon, he's been over in Europe, and so it's kind of been a long run for us in our backyard.
Very good, and that brings up another subject, is for those who want to build this, but it's a budget kind of thing, is there's lots of places where you can get, building materials for free. Like you just said, that you know, you guys got a lot of stuff from buildings that were gonna get demolished. And so what was the process as far as, for those of you who just walked in, is these three, is they've built tiny homes already. So they're actually experts and I'm not, so. And we changed the whole schedule of things and we're just sort of talking about, you know, their process. So if you're on a budget, how do you go about finding materials and how did you contact somebody about the demolished buildings? How did that work?
Well, I mean, we're fortunate, Chicago's pretty, you know, it's a large metropolitan area. There are companies in Chicago that do what they call demolition sales. So what they will do is, these houses are slated for demolition because it's gonna be a tear down, they're gonna put up a McMansion.
Yeah.
And so there's a company that'll come in and it'll be typically on a Saturday and Sunday and you come in and you basically bid on what's there. So, you know, oak flooring that you might spend $4 or $5 a square foot for, buying it from the store, you're buying it for 25 or 50 cents per square foot.
Now, you
But
gotta do all the
you have
work
to
to
do
pull
the
it
removal.
up.
Very good, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sweat equity, but you know, you're buying, I mean, his door was, you know, a door that would typically probably be $700 or $1,000, and he paid, you know, $100 for it. So
Yeah, it's amazing.
basically, his house is done, and I think it cost him somewhere in the neighborhood of $13,000.
That's amazing.
One thing we were able to do that has cut our anticipated costs substantially, one of the big expenses we've come across is the actual trailer itself to build on.
Okay.
Most tiny houses, unless you own land, you're usually putting them on wheels in order to dodge a number of building code regulations. What we were able to do is we actually found a 35-foot old travel trailer, tow behind travel trailer for $300 and demolished that and used that as a frame. So from that, we got the frame, which we would otherwise ended up dropping a couple $1,000s on. We get the hot water heater, we get the hot water pump, we get the appliances that are already miniaturized.
Air conditioning.
We get the air conditioner off the top, the refrigerator that's designed to run off of propane and 12 volts. So that kind of saved a great bit of expenses both on the trailer and on the miscellaneous appliances, wiring, that kind of thing.
Very good.
So
Excellent.
there's some other chances to use reclaim. Again, that's a lot of sweat equity. It's nice, a big project demolishing a trailer without completely destroying everything you want to salvage from it.
Yeah, very good.
Another great place for, and this is like zero sweat equity, it's, then it's I consider it reclaiming. If you go to big box stores, when you do, you know, wood flooring, you go to most big houses need 400 or 500 square feet of this stuff. When they get to the end, they get these boxes that are all sort of picked over and ripped up or whatever. They end up with like 2 or 3 of them. The tile, flooring tile, sometimes they have lumber that's twisted and warped or whatever. Well, since you're building so small, you may only need 2 boxes. You can get that stuff for like, you know, 10 cents on the dollar if you look, you know, you talk to the right person. Or sometimes they just put them, they have a section, clearance section. You go there, if you can find 4 packs of tile, even if half of them are broken, if you only need, you know, 2 boxes to be with, you buy 4 packages and take them home. And sometimes you do tiling, you're gonna cut them in half anyway, so it doesn't matter that some of them are broken.
Very good. I have to talk with you guys, it's great. So by the way, and you guys, you guys have built a tiny home? as
We're in the
well?
process of building. It's about 25% along the way, sitting in our driveway in Baltimore.
Very good.
How big?
What's that?
How big is it?
36 feet.
By,
Oh, wow.
By 8.5 feet wide, 36 feet long. It will be right at the 13.5 feet. Well, in Maryland is a regulatory nightmare when it comes to building things or for automobiles. So 35 feet or shorter, I'm sorry, 36 feet, less than 36 feet is not an automobile in Maryland. And then building code only applies to 40 and above feet. So we have to keep it at that between 35 and 36 feet long, 8.5 feet wide in order not to get harassed.
gray zones, wonderful.
What
Yes,
does that
so-
make it square footage?
That makes square footage, if you count the lofts, about 220, because we have 2 loft spaces also.
So speaking of that, as far as it being like a tiny home, which is essentially a trailer, it's
Not that
a
tiny.
registered motor vehicle thing.
It is.
As long as the width of it has to, from everything I've researched and everything, is legalities, the width has to be 8.5 feet, 8 feet 6 inches,
Correct.
and then the height is 13 feet 6 inches.
13 feet 6 inches without having to go through the process of permits and that kind of stuff.
Yes. So, and that's a lot of the reasons why people are building these things is, you know, to screw the man, you know, with other choice words I could say, but,
You're on camera.
yeah, so.
QPG.
I would caution you in the height a little bit, because when you get out into the boonies, trees don't get trimmed nearly to that height sometimes, so you have to, you know, you're always looking like you have to go to the center of the road,
Yeah.
make sure you don't rip your roof off, put some protection up. Just-
Very good. And so what is your house, what's the roof made of? Metal? Metal, is it like?
My
Yeah,
house?
yeah.
Yeah, it's just regular asphalt shingles.
Oh,
My
it is?
my tiny house is actually on a foundation, so
Okay.
it's a completely legal, permitted, like I had to figure out all the gray zones and
Okay.
all that stuff. Well, one of them, the other one's completely illegal and I just put it on concrete block.
Oh, there you go. Excellent.
Nice.
What are you guys gonna build your roof out of?
Our roof is already on.
Oh, it is?
It's a standing seam metal roof.
Metal roof, okay. So, we've gone through so many subjects. There's a lot of questions. I know Joel asked me, like, as far as being more self-sufficient and everything like that. Collecting rainwater. Have you thought about doing that with your tiny home?
I've, I don't know, I'm thinking about tiny house 3.0, which may be here in New Hampshire. I'm contemplating that because I don't want to have to drill another well, so. I
Okay.
don't know, I've looked into it a little bit, and if you're gonna do that, you need the metal roof, I know that for sure, or plastic. There's actually this really neat stuff called Tuftex.
Yes.
That Pete Dietrichson uses a lot of.
Yeah, and
He's actually great, by the way.
he's from Massachusetts.
Yeah, he actually videotaped my house, and he's got a book coming out too, my house is in.
Oh, very. I mean, honestly, why did they contact me to do this?
Facilitate.
Right, but he actually does a lot of cool workshops, so if somebody wants to learn how to build, or just like talk to somebody who knows, he knows more than I do about building, he's been doing it for years and years and years, like, he does work, like, you can just pay money and go to
Yeah.
one of his workshops in Vermont. And there may actually be one in Royalston this fall from him, so.
And I was
Pete
gonna do
Dietrichson,
that.
he's got, the red book there.
Oh, okay.
Relaxchecks.com.
Yeah. Our son
Yeah.
has-
Let's
yeah, our
pass
son
this
has
around.
that book.
I mean, we'll pass it around. These are a couple of good books. He's got a YouTube channel where he goes around the country essentially and interviews people like yourself. And he does workshops, and it's great because he's in Massachusetts and then he's got property up in Vermont. So it would be nice to like have him come.
I tried to get him to Port Fest last
Are
year.
you doing a water
He
storage
wasn't
tank on yours?
No, no, we have a gray water, the freshwater storage tank from the RV, we're actually bolting that up under as a gray water storage. Storage, whether we end up using it or not, it is free, so,
So,
as far as ours, we plan on just hooking up to a permanent water.
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, and I just wanna say, we've had, so AltExpo has had a tiny house talk a few years ago, I don't remember who gave it, but, and I would love to have Porkfest have like a panel on it or something like that, like, so what I did, I helped run AltExpo, what I did is I just reached out to people at the Tiny Homes Cooperative Shire Facebook group, I was just like, hey, does anybody wanna do it? And so like, Andrew was available, and so like, I'm happy to take him, and I'm happy to take other people who are more experienced too,
yes.
so.
And
But I just kinda like threw it out there, and he was there, so I was like, great.
yeah, so I
That
was
was
here to
weird.
make a jackass out of myself. So we talked about.
Facilitator.
Can I ask one other question? So, well, it sounds like most of you don't live here already, so someone that's looking to move here, like, are there, and you don't obviously have the ability to build it yourself, are there people here that you, like, how?
That is like the ultimate awesome question. This community is so amazing
I'm full.
that, yes, you can absolutely do it. There are people up in like Grafton who have the tools, have the time, have the space to do this, and they want to do this. You just, if you got the money, you just pay for it. So anybody who's looking to move here and do this, it's completely possible. And come talk to me afterwards, and I will gladly introduce you to them. Because there's multiple amounts of people who, this community is just so amazing. I mean, they already have the tools, they already have the experience, they can do that. And like, up north, I've had people who, they even mill their own wood. I mean, it's a self-sufficient community, and it's completely possible. So yes, I mean, like I said, come talk to me afterwards when we're not, like, so I can.
Well, I would figure that maybe, well, I don't know. some people, if they're interested in doing it that haven't already done it, they probably wanna do it.
Yeah, but,
Yeah, when I first inquired about it, I was pointed to the Facebook group Shire Tiny House Cooperative.
yes.
Yeah. One thing that has been brought up to me when I've expressed passing interest in it is, there was a story about somebody's tiny house getting stolen. Just somebody
Yeah,
hitching a trailer and just taking it.
that was in Texas or something like that, yeah, I read that.
So I think it's something that's not often brought up, and I think people need to also consider there's certain security concerns with this that you don't get with a regular house.
Pretty hard to hide it.
Yeah, they found it like 6 days later.
If there's one thing I put, in order to stop the tires from dry rotting anyways, what I've seen a lot of people do is they'll just jack it up, they'll take the tires off and they'll lower it down on concrete blocks.
Yeah.
So at that point, it's not going anywhere.
Okay.
So that's an option and it saves your tires.
You can also take the tongue off, just unbolt the tongue, or they have tongue locks for snow wheel trailers, same thing.
Ours isn't on tires right now. The
Do
tires
you-
are there, but.
Do you have pets? I always say best security is a giant dog. I got one, he's great, Remington is his name.
They're original.
Yeah, but yeah, there are security concerns. And then there are also a lot of privacy concerns. I personally am a very private person usually, and like I used to work nights, so I would always have blackout curtains in my house back in New York. Horrible state, never go there. So that's always an option as well, as far as privacy concerns, and you know, a giant dog and firearms are always a good option for security. I like them, my personal preference. But so yeah, that does raise a great concern, and that story was very interesting. That somebody just stole a house. It was very interesting. So, what other? Go ahead.
I was wondering, you know, what if you wanted to travel with your house? Do campgrounds frown upon tiny houses, or?
Everything I've seen and heard is you're basically treating one of these homes as an RV or a trailer, because that's legally what it is.
Right.
Is you're registering it as a trailer. So. So to bring that up is your trailer has to have lights and all that good stuff and license plates and all that stuff. So no, they don't. There's no reason for them to frown upon it. If anything, I think they'll be like, oh my God, that's amazing. You know, so.
One story I heard on NPR that was they were talking about sometimes campgrounds do frown upon.
Do they?
I don't know why.
Okay, go ahead.
Something about their hookups are standard for the RVs and the trailers and I don't know, maybe it's.
Okay.
I don't know enough about. Go ahead.
I can actually speak to that in some of our research. There's the big it's the Recreational Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Almost anything that you buy in camper has a stamp on it. It's a pretty large union. Union, a lot of campsites, from what I've read, the bigger ones like Kiowa and that kind of stuff, if for it to say long-term, it has to have their little stamp of approval.
Okay.
That being said, I individually own places that don't care, places that won't look, places I've never heard of tiny house, but I don't know if you would actually have a problem in reality or not.
Yeah.
We've never come across it. Ours will be too heavy to move casually like that, so.
Okay. And I'm happy you actually asked that, because when we talk about the tiny house movement, is everyone's always like, I gotta get a trailer, I gotta build this house, you know. It's much larger than that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a house on a trailer. You could buy a school bus, you know, it's so much, go ahead.
I saw a story about a retired pilot who lives in a retired jetliner.
Yeah. Okay.
In the woods.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
The other thing I'll sort of caution about, tiny houses don't tow very well. Because they're built like regular houses, they're very, very heavy. So if your goal is to live like a gypsy around the country, I mean, if you're gonna move one place for 6 months and then move another 6 months later, great, do that, that's fine. But you might find that a regular old RV is cheaper, you get an older one, fix it up yourself, and it's
Right.
probably easier to tow, just from a weight.
Like anything, everybody's got it. You get it to match your lifestyle. Got to
Yeah.
customize it.
Yeah, and use your imagination, that's the biggest key. So speaking of towing capacity, since you don't have a mortgage, you can buy a vehicle that can tow it. So everything I've heard is as far as towing capacity, when you moved your house, what did you use to tow it?
I never moved my house.
Oh, you never moved
Oh,
your
well,
house?
actually, that's not true, I
What do
did.
what do you guys plan on using as a vehicle to tow your,
I don't know, we haven't moved it.
Our son, I think, was gonna have it professionally moved,
okay.
actually, because he didn't wanna just get a pickup truck and try to drive it across country either.
Okay.
So he wanted to kinda hire it to wherever its final place was gonna be.
Okay, alright, so everything I've read is like an F-250, a 2.5 ton truck,
Absolutely.
is gonna be needed. And to answer your question, is there are people in New Hampshire who have vehicles to move these things. So as far as like your question of everything's here within this community, and that's what's so great about here, is they're here, you just bargain with them, you know? So even being able to move your house is possible, so.
What would you or anybody think would be the cost if you're, because I saw on here, it's like, if you do it yourself, it's this amount, but like, if you're using other people to help you or do it, then what's probably the cost?
I don't know. There is, on Facebook, there's a group for the Shire Tiny Homes, and I think if, like, essentially when, my story is I'm getting out there trying to find property, and then I plan on building one of these and going through your guys' experience. By the way, I want to get all of you guys' information before you leave here. So, like, when I build mine, I'm gonna just, whoever wants to help me, you know, because we're all here we're all in it together, I guess. And, so I don't know what the cost essentially would be. I think if you find the supplies to build it, I think that's all you really need, because there's people who want to learn. You know, there's people who just help because they're good people. And, so I don't know, it's all about networking within this community, and that's why I guess we're all here today, you know, is to do that. So that's a great question. When you know the answer, find out, tell me, you know, go ahead.
The one comment I'll make is that probably the number one thing you can do to reduce cost is to figure out how to do it yourself. Like, go to a workshop and learn how to build stuff, because if you're driving down the road past the construction site, you say, hey, I need those studs that they're ripping out of that wall, and you go pick them up yourself, you know that you need them. If you're relying on somebody else to do it, you're not gonna know you need those. You just wasted money. When something breaks, how are you gonna fix it? Like, you need to know how to do a little bit of wiring, a little bit of plumbing. It's a skill that's gonna go with you forever. So you might as well learn to do it. It's not hard to
I
do.
know like some things, but like, I have some injuries that make some things too difficult now, but I've done things in the past. But, so I could do some things, I know, but.
There you go. So, go ahead.
And there are also some companies who build great tiny houses, and you can buy them like a shell where you just finish the inside. I mean, there are companies who build them, some of them are rather expensive, what, 30,000?
Yeah, I think
the cheapest.
probably their cheaper models like 30,000,
Yeah.
but then
And
it's
they go up
done
to
though, it's
60,
finished when you get it,
70,000, so at that point, it's, you know, as expensive as buying
Yeah,
some small houses.
there's like Tumbleweed Homes, which they're, correct me if I'm wrong, they were like the original people.
Yeah, there's also
They're
Boneyard
actually,
out of
they're actually a
DC.
member of the RBA, the big,
Okay.
association, so when they do it, they put the little stamps on it and all that stuff that make it easy to not get harassed with.
Okay, there you go. So, yeah, there's lots of information out there for stuff like that. Come talk to me afterwards, I'll give you. And actually, real quick, I don't want to like plug their websites, but if you guys are wondering about great information, the tinylife.com, they actually have like a checklist on it to like go through and like first time people in tiny house office and all that stuff. But the maintenance and stuff like that, let's go into that. Chris brought up, if you're building something yourself, you can fix it, you're more self-reliant. That's why people want to get into this movement. It's like when I build a rifle, I'm going through it tooth and nail, you know, and I'm putting it together so when it malfunctions on me, I can, you know, I can do my thing and get it working again. So when you have a home that's smaller, you're more self-sufficient. You don't have to go talk to a plumber because you built it yourself, you know. I mean, how many people have called the plumber and it's like $600 to fit, like, come on. Tiny homes, less pipes that can fail, less things that can fail, and you built it yourself so you can take care of it yourself. All right, so that's another huge advantage of going through this stuff. So, what else have we not covered here? We've gone through so many things. This is great.
How long about did it take you to like build yours from the ground up?
Much longer than I thought was done. It takes a long time. I mean, my second one took me a long time. It was much bigger, but I mean, you just have to keep pounding through it. By the end of it, you're gonna be so sick of building, you're gonna be like, God, this just has to end. And it
By the
doesn't.
end of the year, I thought you meant like it took a couple years.
It took me 18 months to build my big tiny house. It took me
Okay.
about 4 or 5 months to build a little 66 square foot tiny house.
Okay.
I mean, my big tiny house has a lot of very high-tech insulation techniques, and they were very time-consuming to put in. So it's just, you just kill yourself. At some point, some weeks you just have to like, you know what? I'm not doing any work this weekend. I'm just gonna go off and
What time frame are you guys on?
Delayed.
Delayed?
No.
We were actually, our original plan was to be finished, actually in middle of March. Like I said, that quickly is pushed back. Now we're looking at more realistic expectations of finishing in the May-June timeframe.
Okay. And what do I
Make
do
it
guys?
take longer.
We thought
Ours
it's not.
started like
thinking
3
about
summers
upward
ago,
now.
but being in Chicago, we can't work on it in the winter.
And
Yeah.
my son's been living overseas and doing other things, so he's not there all the time to help. And it's really just become more of a hobby for me to finish it.
Yeah.
So it's, I might work on it on a weekend or, whatever, so.
So I mean, it's basically done at this point, basically. There's a couple little things that still need to be done, but if we had to move it, we could.
Okay.
Yeah, if we would've just devoted our, every day after work and every weekend to doing it, it probably would've been a 5 or 6 month thing, but,
We have
like I
lives.
said,
Right.
it was a hobby, it was
I haven't
more,
even
it was
moved
more
out
of a
yet, so I
hobby for
plan on, like,
us.
building it like while I still live with my parents and then moving out like right after, so like I'll probably spend the whole summer working on it
Mhm.
and then move out after.
But seriously, go to the blogs because people will interact with you and give you really good ideas.
There's a lot of
Our
good
s-
information out there.
Yeah, our son does have a blog, which we can share with everybody later if you want, but, and it shows step by step what his process was. And you can
Okay.
see the dates on them, how extended they became.
Yeah,
But it's all documented.
okay.
So what, do you can share, what's your son's blog?
It's kaistinyhouse.wordpress.com.
Yeah, I think so.
I've seen that.
Was that advertised?
Yeah, he hasn't
somewhere or
updated,
something?
I've seen that.
and he's so busy with his occupation that he hasn't updated it in like over a year. And so in the last year, it's basically, like if you look at his last entry, it's like the walls aren't finished. Now it's like completely finished. So, and I'm like, Kai,
Yeah, update it. Come on.
yeah, I got all this done for you, can you at least update your blog? But he's out in California now and he's working 80 hours a week.
Very good.
So, yeah, I think he's actually trying to get back to the Midwest. And I don't know, at some point, he would like to live in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because
And
he wants to
even-
change his lifestyle. He's working 80 hours a week and he's building a career and stuff, but it's like, yeah, this isn't really what I wanna do.
Yeah.
but the other thing, even he decided, well, originally, the plan was that he would, because his job would be moving around, that he would have his house to move around.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that, it hadn't gotten done in time, but, so now his plan is, he still wants to use the tiny house, but find a piece of land, park it on, that's gonna be his getaway place,
Yeah.
Okay.
so.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One other plug, there's a video series that really that I'm really following. They're actually still building it, although they're almost finished. It's a couple in Canada. Tiny Ness is the videos. So if you search Tiny Ness on YouTube, every single step of the way they shot about a 30-minute, pretty well put together video showing start to finish every single thing they've done, buying the stuff, planning the stuff. They have an entire thing on them on Google SketchUp, catting it. But they're very, very detailed, so that seemed like a really good resource as far as looking at, okay, exactly, this is the kind of stuff we run up into.
What is it called?
Tiny Nest,
Okay.
right now they're like 70, 30-minute videos into it on YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah, they just finished their siding in their last video, so.
Plenty of information out there.
Also, if you go to tinyhomebuilding.com, I did the same thing. I have one blog post for every weekend I worked on it. So I got pictures and details from foundation up to the finishing touches.
So we've talked about like all this awesome stuff. Let's bring a little bit of negativity into the room. In your building projects, was there any point, because anytime there's a project, you always just like, damn, this ain't worth it. what was the one thing that sort of set you off, was like, this is just horrible, you know, have you had that experience, and how did you get through that experience? I know you're laughing, so obviously you got something.
Well, no, I mean, I'm thinking back to when we first started, and it was in Chicago, and it was like in, you know, July or August, and it was a very hot, very humid summer, and it's like, this isn't my house, why am I out here killing myself, you know, trying to put these stupid walls up, and it, but, I mean, that was really like in the first 2 weeks, and then after that, it was like, well, this is pretty cool, this is fun, you know?
Once you see it taking
And
shape.
I mean, you know, at least for me, you know, the part that was really fun was finding these reclaimed materials and reusing them and figuring out how it would all work, and, you know, I mean, like even, I mean, he's set up so that he can hook up to a potable water system, but he's also set up to where he could travel because he's got a 50-gallon freshwater tank and a 50-gallon holding tank for gray water, and those actually came out of a vehicle that she owns, and because she was upgrading to 100-gallon tanks. And, you know, so it's just, I mean, you know, if you keep your eyes open, you see, you know, or you know, look at Craigslist, I mean, there's so many resources out there to find materials that you can use where you're not having to buy everything brand new, and that, to me, that was pretty exciting to reuse stuff.
Yeah, to see my son drive around the neighborhood and come to a screeching halt in front of a trash pile in front of somebody's house, there's a quarter cabinet. You know? And it's perfect for what he needs it for.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
you know.
Very good, so that would be rather motivating, absolutely. So, now as far as like the lifestyle, I mean, negativities as far as I'm experienced in tiny living because I've done 12 years in the military. I know, sorry. But, so I'm real experienced in what I need, you know. I can carry everything I need to live on my back, and I'm happy with that. When you decided to finally do tiny house living, what did you get rid of? What was it hard? What was the process for you? And like just throwing away everything, right?
Yeah, basically, you kind of have to do it in waves. You can't do it all at once, because I had a house full of crap. So I got a big 10-yard dumpster, and I kind of had a rule, like if it's worth less than X, and I haven't used it in 6 months, it goes in the dumpster. And so I did that, and then everything else that fell out of that, and there was a lot, I put in a storage bin for a while, and this was actually kind of a cool trick. I put it in the storage bin, and as I was building the house, I sometimes had to go back to the storage bin and pull it out. But by the time I was done, it was 18 months. And so all the stuff that was in the bin had been there for 18 months, and I hadn't needed it in 18 months. And so I sort of said, you know what? I haven't needed this crap in 18 months. I probably don't need it. And so I sold it to some tool, like a tool dealer, and just threw the rest of it away. And so that
What about you guys? Are you guys going through that process right now?
We're still in the process of paring down, and so far, that's been one of our biggest challenges, is we're coming to the realization we're gonna have to get away with about 1/10 of our current possessions in order to comfortably live in this thing. And not just for us, for our niece too. She has all our toys and games. As easy it is for us to throw our stuff out, it's like, it gets even harder when you're thinking, okay, when you're having to pick which toys your niece is gonna keep
Yeah.
with her, that
I
gets
feel
really
so
hard.
bad getting
Yeah.
rid of her things. I'm like, she has more clothes than I do, and she never wears all of them. I'm like, I can't get rid of this. She's gonna need this. What if it's cold, or you know?
How do you pick your favorite Barbie doll? I mean,
Yeah.
So I want to bring up another electricity. I know you've had lots of experience with like living off solar panels and everything like that. How do you get your electricity?
me?
Yeah.
I have 2 solar panels and a battery bank.
Okay.
And I'm an electrical engineer, so I designed my house to be super, super efficient on everything.
Okay.
But when I do need like big AC power, like for a microwave or toaster, I have a generator.
Okay.
And the recommendation I'll make to everybody is don't buy an outside generator. You have to run outside and pull the cord and start it. It's a real pain in the ass. Find something that you can push a button. I'm working on that. I'm gonna do it. I just gotta find one.
Okay. Very good.
And snow, you know. It's a pain in the ass.
What is your battery bank and solar?
Since I don't use much power, I use probably 10 amp hours a day. So I use all LED lighting, I use a 12-volt well pump, what else? Everything in the house runs off 12 volts. I have a charger, my laptop charger runs off 12, everything's 12 volts. In fact, the house is wired for 12 volts and it's NEC legal. So I have a 200 amp hour battery bank and then like 200 watts of solar power. And I'm using an MPPT style charge controller, which by the way, don't buy anything else, buy the MPPT charge controller because you're throwing money away if you buy anything else. It's the amount of energy I've been able to harvest is night and day. especially in the wintertime during these shoulder seasons, you pick up like double the power.
Here's a great question for you guys. How many outlets do you guys have in your homes? Do you guys?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's got 5 in the loft. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's a lot more than I would
6.
expect.
He's got 11. He has 11 total.
11. Wow.
And
All right.
I mean, we're not doing solar. We're not doing 12 volt. Ours just has I bought a standard kind of RV hookup that can go either between a 30 or a 50 amp. So I can go either 120 volt or 240 volt. 120 volt on 30 amps or 240 volt on 50 amps.
All right. So since we're on the subject, that's really cool. What makes this possible, this whole movement possible, is essentially the mariner community. All the yachts, the fancy, all that stuff. Is they've developed a whole bunch of technology that to go into compact spaces. So if you're wondering like where to shop and stuff like that, check out your, go to your local boat shows because they have tiny dishwashers, tiny washers and dryers, and it's like a lot of these homes are heated and cooked using propane. And they have these tiny little propane fireplaces that were meant to go in boats. Now they're essentially becoming land yachts, so that's cool. So that's also why I'm interested in this, is I want to be a pirate someday, and I can be a land pirate using a tiny home. So, but yeah, so a lot of this technology is through that movement, and so can't wait to build one and put a pirate flag on it. So, but yeah, so what else, do we have time? What time is it?
We got about
5
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, so I guess we'll just wrap up for those of you guys who've been in and out. Here in New Hampshire, it's a great place, and I applaud you guys for wanting to move here. There is definitely a community that you can build your tiny home and everything like that. You just have to be able to fund it and everything. And so you guys are looking to move here. There's people who have land that are more than willing to start setting up places with tiny homes. And if we start building these, which sounds like we have a lot of people who want to do it, we can, like, my plan is to build one, and so I can essentially import people for, Liberty people, is because I have a 1-bedroom apartment, 750 square feet, and I live in the bedroom. I don't own that much stuff, and through that, I'm able to find people on Facebook who are like, hey, I'm moving here. I don't know, I have no place to go, and it's like, here, you can stay on my, couch, which I don't have a couch. You can stay on my floor in my living room, and until you get yourself set up here in Manchester, and that's what's so great about this. So that's what I plan on doing with building a tiny home, is to build one and allow people to live on it until they get their feet wet and, go on and start their life here in Libertyville, New Hampshire. So, yeah, it's totally possible. Do you guys have any other questions?
There is one other thing I wanted to ask. Is it possible to build a tiny home with internet access and
Great point.
computational power?
Absolutely. So, I did do that research. Satellite internet, all right, dish.com. This is just a price range, I'm not advising, whatever. $69.99 a month, 50 gigabytes anytime, and 50 gigabytes off peak, up to 15 megabytes per second download speed. I've never had, Joel, you've had, your parents have satellite internet, how do they like it?
It's working great. I mean, it was a work in progress for a while.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's a more cutting edge, but so far right now it works great for just about everything. You still get to like video conferencing and everything.
Does that answer your question?
Right.
And what's so great about technology, he brought this up. Yeah, and he brought this up, it's essentially like a year from now, technology is ever expanding. Things can be outdated real quick nowadays, so, I mean, by the time we were talking about timelines, you know, 18 months or whatever, you're building a house, and by the time you're done with your house, you're like, oh my god, this new technology is here, you know? So that's what's so cool about that. Any other questions? I hope I was able to answer questions that you guys had in your heads and whatnot. And thank you guys for all your experience.
We should do a Pork Fest meetup, just anybody who wants to.
I think it would also be a great idea just to have a panel of tiny home people, because we could have, like, you know, maybe even you know, more people involved and stuff like that. So.
And thank you, Nick. Let's give Nick a little applause.
Good. I need the ego boost. Thanks everybody. Oh, good.